The role of drugs in the prison system, life inside the walls, powder lines behind concrete. Before we begin, like the video, subscribe, and drop a comment if you think you know how this ends, because inside these walls, nothing is ever what it seems. The sirens were already screaming when the first body was found. It was 3:17 a.m. at Black Ridge State Penitentiary, a maximum security prison buried in the frozen outskirts of upstate New York. Snow whipped across the razor wire fences, sticking to the floodlights that bathed the yard in a sickly yellow glow. Inside cell block D, alarms blared as correctional officers rushed toward a collapsed inmate lying face down on the concrete tier. By the time medical staff arrived, it was too late. Inmate number 44721 Marcus Red Holloway was dead. At first glance, it looked like another overdose. It wouldn't have been surprising. Black Ridge had been battling a quiet epidemic for years. Synthetic opioids, smuggled Suboxone strips, meth folded into letters soaked in chemicals. Drugs were everywhere, even in a place built to keep the world out. But this one felt different. Red wasn't some low-level addict scrounging for a fix. He ran cell block D. Inside those concrete walls, he was judge, jury, and kingmaker. If drugs were moving, he was the one allowing it. And if someone crossed him, they didn't stay comfortable for long. So how does a man who controls the supply die from it? Detective Laura Bennett stood outside the prison gates just after dawn, staring up at the towering gray structure. She'd seen enough prison deaths to know when something didn't add up. Officially, she was there to confirm an overdose and sign off on paperwork. Unofficially, the warden had called her with one sentence: "This isn't random." Inside the medical examiner's temporary station, Red's body told a complicated story. There were no obvious signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds, just a faint puncture mark on his arm and a thin line of dried blood beneath his nose. The toxicology screen would take days, but one detail stood out immediately: the dosage. Whoever administered the drugs knew exactly how much to use. Not enough to cause instant suspicion, just enough to shut down his breathing slowly, quietly, in the middle of the night. This wasn't sloppy, Bennett muttered. This was deliberate. Black Ridge housed over 2,000 inmates. Gangs divided the blocks like territories in a war zone. But the real currency wasn't cigarettes anymore. It was powder, pills, paper laced with chemicals that dissolved under the tongue. Drugs inside prison weren't just about addiction. They were power. They bought protection. They bought loyalty. They bought silence. And Red Holloway had been the gatekeeper. Warden Charles Everett met Bennett in his office overlooking the yard. He was pale, exhausted. "If word gets out that someone took Red down," he said, "we'll have riots by lunch." "Who benefits from his death?" Bennett asked. Everett hesitated. "That's the problem. Everyone." Over the past year, contraband seizures had doubled. Guards were under investigation. Packages slipped through mailrooms. Drones had been spotted dropping bundles into the exercise yard under cover of darkness. Every time the administration cracked down, the supply adapted, like a living organism, and Red had somehow managed to keep order in the chaos. Until now. Bennett started with Red's cell. It was cleaner than expected. A thin mattress, religious pamphlet stacked neatly beside a dog-eared paperback novel. Nothing screamed Kingpin. But hidden inside the hollow metal frame of his bunk was something more interesting: a ledger. Tiny, precise handwriting filled the pages. Names, numbers, dates, payments owed, shipments received, and then one final entry from 3 nights earlier. New pipeline confirmed. 40 units. West Yard. Green light from C. Bennett stared at the last letter. C. Who's C? She asked. The warden swallowed. Could be anyone. But Bennett wasn't convinced. She pulled surveillance footage from the tier that night. At 2:58 a.m., a guard made routine rounds. At 3:04, the camera glitched for exactly 27 seconds. Static. Distortion. Then it resumed. At 3:17, Red was found dead. 27 seconds. Long enough. The guard on duty during the blackout was Officer Daniel Ruiz, 6 years on the job, clean record, 2 kids at home. He looked terrified when Bennett sat across from him in the interrogation room. "I didn't touch him," Ruiz insisted. "The cameras glitch all the time." "Convenient timing," Bennett replied. Ruiz wiped sweat from his brow. "You think I'd risk my career over an inmate?" She slid a photo of Red across the table. "I think someone did." Ruiz's hands trembled, but not with guilt, with fear. "You don't understand," he whispered. "The drugs, they're not just coming from outside anymore." Bennett leaned forward. "What does that mean?" Ruiz's eyes darted to the mirrored glass behind her. "It means this place doesn't run the way you think it does." Before he could say another word, the door burst open. A correctional captain stepped inside, face tight with urgency. "We've got a situation." Cell Block D had erupted. Word of Red's death had spread faster than the alarms. Inmates pounded on their cell doors. Fights broke out in the showers. One man was stabbed with a sharpened toothbrush. And in the chaos, another inmate was found unconscious, barely breathing, clutching a small plastic packet identical to the one discovered in Red's bloodstream. Same batch, same purity. This wasn't a random overdose. It was a message. Back in her temporary office, Bennett studied the ledger again. That final note, the new pipeline, the green light from C. If Red had been expanding operations, someone might have felt threatened. Or someone higher up had decided he'd outlived his usefulness. She requested internal financial audits on prison staff, overtime patterns, unusual deposits. Within hours, a red flag appeared. Large, unexplained cash movements tied to an account belonging to a senior administrator. Not a guard, not an inmate, but someone with full access to security systems, someone whose name began with C. Deputy Warden Calvin Mercer. A respected official with 22 years of service, the man responsible for overseeing contraband prevention. Bennett felt a chill crawl up her spine. If Mercer was involved, this wasn't just about drugs. It was about control at the highest level. She ordered a discreet search of Mercer's office. Inside a locked drawer, investigators found a prepaid phone and a slip of paper with a single phrase written in bold ink. Phase 2 begins after Red. Bennett stated the words. Red's death wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning, and whatever Phase 2 meant, it was already in motion. But when they opened Mercer's bank safety deposit box later that evening, what they found inside changed everything. The safety deposit box was smaller than Detective Laura Bennett expected. Inside, there were no stacks of cash, no obvious bundles of drugs, no dramatic smoking gun, just 3 items: a flash drive, a folded sheet of paper covered in coded initials, and a photograph. The photo stopped Bennett cold. It showed the prison yard at Blackridge, taken from above, likely from a drone. Several inmates were circled in red ink. Markers read Holloway was one of them, but he wasn't the only one marked. 2 other inmates had XS drawn across their faces. One of them was already in the infirmary from the morning's overdose. The other had been transferred to solitary confinement hours before Red's death, reportedly for disciplinary reasons. Phase 2, Bennett whispered. This wasn't random retaliation. It was systematic. Back at the precinct, the flash drive revealed more. Spreadsheets, shipment schedules, guard rotation logs, surveillance blind spots mapped down to the second. Whoever built this system understood Blackridge better than anyone inside it. And the shipments weren't small. Over the last 8 months, narcotics have been entering the prison through at least 4 different channels: mail, kitchen deliveries, medical supply crates, and drone drops timed precisely during shift changes. Each shipment was labeled with coded letters: C, A, M, and one that appeared more frequently than the others: L. Bennett ran the initials against staff and inmate records. Calvin Mercer, confirmed. Red Holloway, confirmed. But L? There were too many possibilities. Then the toxicology report on Red came back. Synthetic opioid, lab modified, high potency, but unusually clean pharmaceutical grade. This didn't come from some backyard operation, the medical examiner said. This was manufactured with precision. That meant connections beyond prison walls. Meanwhile, inside Blackridge, tension was boiling over. With Red gone, control of Cell Block D fractured overnight. Smaller crews began fighting for dominance. Debts were called in. Protection agreements dissolved. The drug flow, instead of stopping, doubled. That was the most alarming part. If Red had been the gatekeeper, His death should have disrupted supply. Instead, shipments increased by nearly 30% within 48 hours. Phase 2 wasn't chaos. It was expansion. Bennett requested emergency authorization to interview Deputy Warden Mercer. But when officers arrived at his home that evening, the house was dark. His car was in the driveway, front door unlocked. Inside, the television flickered quietly in the living room. A glass of whiskey sat half-finished on the table. Mercer was nowhere to be found. Upstairs, the bedroom closet stood open. Several suits were missing, a travel bag gone. On the kitchen counter, Bennett noticed something small but deliberate. Mercer's prison access badge. Left behind. It is not running, she said quietly. It is staging. The following morning, another incident rocked Blackridge. The inmate previously transferred to solitary. One of the men circled in the photograph was found unconscious in his isolation cell. No drugs on him. No contraband. Just a single sentence scratched into the concrete wall beside his bunk. L is next. He survived. Barely. Under heavy supervision. Bennett sat across from him in the infirmary. His name was Lionel Graves. L. You were marked, Bennett said, sliding the photograph in front of him. Lionel's face drained of color. I told Red it was a mistake, he rasped. I told him this would happen. What would happen? Lionel closed his eyes. Phase 2. Bennett leaned closer. Tell me. Lionel swallowed hard. Red didn't build the pipeline. He inherited it. Mercer wasn't the top. Then who is? Lionel's voice dropped to a whisper. The system. Bennett felt frustration rise. That's not an answer. You think this is about one deputy warden. Lionel said weakly. You think this is about one prison. He coughed violently, pain flashing across his face. The drugs move through here. Yes, he continued. But Blackridge is just a distribution hub. Smaller facilities can't get supply directly. They route it through us. Bennett's pulse quickened. How? Transfers, Lionel said. Inmates move from state to state. Packages hidden inside legal mail that can't be opened. Medical transports. Even rehabilitation programs. He stared at her with hollow eyes. Red wanted out. He wanted to expose it. That stopped her. Expose who? Lionel hesitated. Before he could answer, alarm screamed again. This time, it wasn't a riot. It was a lockdown. A corrections officer had been found in the maintenance corridor near cell block D unconscious, bleeding from the head. Beside him lay an empty evidence bag. The bag that had contained Red's original contraband packet. It was gone. Security footage showed a shadowed figure entering the corridor during a brief camera outage. Another glitch. Same duration. 27 seconds. Someone was cleaning up. Back at headquarters, Bennett pieced it together. Mercer had access to camera systems. He could create blind spots. Red had discovered something bigger, something threatening enough to warrant elimination. Lionel knew more than he admitted. And L wasn't just Lionel. It was also Laura. Her stomach tightened as she reviewed the coded sheet from the deposit box again. C, R, M, L. They weren't just shipment labels. They were initials of participants. Calvin, Red, Mercer, Laura. Her own name had appeared 3 times in the ledger's margins, dates corresponding to her previous investigations into contraband at other facilities. Someone had been tracking her, watching how close she was getting. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. A distorted voice spoke calmly. You should have left Red's death alone. Bennett's grip tightened. Who is this? You're asking the wrong questions. Phase 2 isn't about drugs. Silence stretched. Then what is it about? The voice responded without hesitation. Control. The line went dead. Moments later, her email pinged. One attachment. A live surveillance feed. Not from the prison. From outside her apartment building. Someone was sitting in a car across the street. Watching. Bennett realized the case had moved beyond Blackridge. This wasn't just corruption. It was organized, led, and personal. When she rushed back to the infirmary to confront Lionel again, his bed was empty. Guards swore he had been sedated, under watch, but the security cameras on that wing, 27 seconds of static, and when they checked the transport logs, they discovered something that made the room go silent. Lionel Grave had officially been transferred out of Blackridge 2 hours earlier, signed off by a digital authorization code belonging to Detective Laura Bennett. Detective Laura Bennett stared at the transfer authorization on the screen, her own name stamped at the bottom in clean digital ink. Time logged, 2:14 p.m. Location of authorization, Central Police Network. But at 2:14 p.m., she had been inside the prison infirmary questioning Lionel Graves. Someone hadn't just forged her signature. They had access to her credentials. And that meant one thing: the corruption wasn't just inside Blackridge. It had reached into law enforcement. The room felt smaller, heavier. Trace the transport route, she ordered. Now! Records showed Lionel had been moved under emergency medical transfer to a private correctional facility 3 hours south Graymore Detention Center, a mid-level prison with a history of overcrowding and quiet complaints about contraband. Another hub. Phase 2 wasn't about expanding drugs inside one prison. It was about scaling distribution across multiple institutions. And Lionel was either a liability or a key piece of it. Bennett drove through the night, snow slicing across the highway, her mind racing. Every detail replayed in fragments read ledger. Mercer's disappearance, the coded initials, the phone call, the surveillance outside her apartment. This wasn't random intimidation. It was choreography. At Graymore, the warden greeted her with rehearsed confusion. "Lionel Graves," he said, scanning the system. "We have no record of that inmate arriving here." Bennett's jaw tightened. The transfer log says he arrived at 6:42 p.m. The warden turned the monitor toward her. Blank. No entry. No intake scan. No security footage of a transport vehicle entering the gates. It was as if Lionel had vanished mid-route. She requested highway traffic cameras along the transport path. There at mile marker 88 of corrections, van pulled onto the shoulder. Timestamp, 4:03 p.m. 4 minutes later, a black SUV stopped behind it. Then the camera feed cut. When it resumed, the van was driving again. But something was different. There were only two silhouettes visible in the front seat: the transport officer and the driver. No third figure in the rear compartment. No sign of Lionel. The official report from the transport officers claimed routine mechanical delay. Under questioning, both men appeared nervous but consistent, until Bennett asked one simple question: why does the mileage on the van not match the route distance? Silence. The numbers were off by exactly 27 miles. 27 again. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a signature. Back at headquarters, Bennett dug deeper into Phase 2 financial trail. Offshore accounts, shell companies linked to rehabilitation initiatives, federal grants intended to combat prison drug abuse redirected through private contractors, and one recurring corporate name surfaced repeatedly: Lexington Correctional Consulting, CEO Charles Everett, the warden of Blackridge, the same man who had called her and said, "This isn't random." He hadn't been afraid of chaos. He had been afraid of exposure. Red Holloway had discovered that the drug epidemic inside Blackridge wasn't just tolerated, it was engineered. Controlled supply created controlled demand. Controlled demand justified increased funding. Increased funding flowed through consulting firms that promised solutions to a crisis it quietly sustained. The drugs weren't slipping through cracks. They were being managed, and when Red threatened to expose it, Phase 2 began. Eliminate the liability. Restructure leadership. Expand distribution. Bennett requested an emergency warrant to search Everett's financials and communications. Approval came within the hour. But when officers arrived at Everett's residence, history repeated itself. Lights on. Door unlocked. House empty. On his desk sat a single envelope addressed to her. Inside was a printed photograph. Her apartment building. And beneath it, a note: "You were supposed to join us." Her heart pounded. The coded initials: CIML. Calvin. Red. Mercer. Laura. She wasn't being marked as a target. She had been marked as an option. A recruit. Her previous investigations into prison contraband had earned her a reputation for intelligence and discretion. Someone high up had seen potential. but she had refused without ever realizing she'd been offered. The distorted phone call hadn't been a threat. It had been a warning. You're asking the wrong questions. Because the real question wasn't who was moving the drugs. It was who benefited from the appearance of fighting them. As Bennett processed the scale of it, her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She answered without speaking. This time, the voice wasn't distorted. It was calm. Familiar. Deputy Warden Calvin Mercer. "You figured it out," he said. "Where is Lionel?" she demanded. "Safe." "Safe for who?" "For the system," Mercer replied evenly. He agreed to cooperate. With what? With survival. Bennett stepped outside into the cold night air, scanning the dark street. "You killed Red," she said. "No," Mercer answered. "Red made a choice. He wanted to burn it down. You don't dismantle a machine by kicking it. You either run it or you get crushed." "And Everett?" A brief pause. "Everett built the expansion model. I executed it. But we're not the top, Laura. Not even close." She felt the weight of it. Layers above layers. "You framed me," she said. "Not framed. Tested. If you panicked, you'd expose yourself. If you dug deeper, you'd see the structure. And if I refuse..." Mercer's voice hardened slightly. "Then you become Phase 3. The line went dead. Within hours, federal agents stormed Blackridge and Graymo. Warrants had been escalated. Financial documents seized. Multiple arrests made guards, administrators, private contractors. Charles Everett was apprehended at a small regional airport attempting to board a charter flight. Mercer turned himself in quietly the next morning. But Lionel Graves? Official records listed him as deceased. Transport accident. Unconfirmed details. No body publicly released. And that was the part that haunted Bennett. Because 3 months later, during a routine audit at a minimum security facility in another state, investigators intercepted a shipment of legal mail soaked in synthetic opioids. Stamped on the corner of one envelope were 4 faint letters. CIML. The same code. The same signature. Different prison. Different state. The machine hadn't stopped. It had adapted. A congressional investigation followed. Headlines exploded. Officials promised reform. Oversight committees were formed. Policies rewritten. But inside the walls, inmates still whispered about new suppliers, new pipelines, and a man who had once disappeared during transport now rumored to be running operations somewhere no one was looking. Detective Laura Bennett stood alone outside Blackridge months later, staring up at the floodlights cutting through the night. They thought they had exposed the truth. They thought they had dismantled the network. But systems like that don't vanish. They shift. They evolve. They wait. And as another siren wailed in the distance, echoing against the concrete and razor wire, Bennett couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere behind locked doors and security cameras, Phase 3 had already begun. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one.